This is Bandit, the Atari 8-bit podcast.
Tracey Cullinan is here with us this morning in the studio, and welcome. Where'd you get your computer expertise?
Well, I'm pretty much self-taught, and I learned it from books and magazines. I was first interested in electronics, and I subscribed to a lot of electronics magazines. And I started seeing a lot of articles about programming computers. I thought it was really interesting, so...
So what else is new in Silicon Valley for a teenager to be interested in computers?
This is Antic, the Atari 8-bit podcast. I'm Kay Savitz. This is the 7th in a series of episodes featuring the kids of Atari's Youth Advisory Board. In 1983, Atari formed a Youth Advisory Board selecting teenagers from around the United States to share their opinions about computers and video games, test software, and promote Atari's computers at events. The group consisted of kids aged 14 through 18, including Tracey Cullinan. Tracey worked as a salesperson at the ComputerLand store in Los Altos, California, starting at the age of 12. He started a software company, Superior Software, which produced custom software for local businesses, as well as a couple of games for the Apple II computer. At 14, Tracey was invited to be a member of the Youth Advisory Board. As part of that job, he went to the Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago to demonstrate Atari computers. The next year, as a 15-year-old, Tracey was interviewed on the Today Show as a young entrepreneur. There's a chapter about Tracey in the 1984 book Computer Kids by George Sullivan. His picture is on the back cover of the book. I'm going to read several passages from that book, quotes from Tracey. A ComputerLand store opened in a mall near my home. I made friends with the people who worked in the store, and they let me use the computers there. The store happened to be within walking distance of where I live, and I'd go there after school and on weekends, or almost any time I had free time. I often wrote game programs on the computers and brought a disk on which to store the programs. They let me keep the disk at the store. When customers came into the store, I'd sometimes help out by showing them what a computer could do. They'd be amazed. What's this 9-year-old kid doing showing me how a computer works? I'm now working at the store. I started as an employee when I was 12. I was in sales at first, but later shifted over to computer repair. I now know 5 or 6 computer languages: BASIC, Pascal, Logo, plus 3 machine languages, 6502, the one that's used on the Apple and Atari, and the one I use the most, Z80. I'm starting to learn 8086, the language for the IBM personal computer. The company that I operate is called Superior Software. I prepare custom programs for businesses in the area. One program involves inventorying and invoicing for a company that sells charcoal fire starters. I've got another program that gathers stock market prices from a computer and then correlates them and prints them out for a local stockbroker. A third program I wrote for the Los Altos Little League. It's a mailing list program. They use it in sending out notices about tryouts, practices, and things like that. I became a member of the Atari Youth Advisory Board because someone at the consulting firm that was getting the names of the kids together for Atari happened to know my dad. When the consulting firm found out that I was into computers, they put my name on the list. Then the people at Atari picked me. We've been giving Atari advice mostly on their home computers. Later, I think they're going to ask us for advice on their video games and arcade games. I also use the computer to write video game programs once in a while. One that I've written is called Glutton. That was for the Apple II. You, the shooter, are armed with little missiles and positioned on the right side of the screen. You can move up and down only. You shoot to the left. The glutton moves back and forth across the screen. The glutton likes to eat. Different kinds of food fall from the top of the screen. Some of it is good food, like apples, carrots, and chicken drumsticks. But some of the food is junk food, like cupcakes and soda pop. The object of the game is to keep the glutton well fed, but healthy. You try to eliminate the pieces of junk food by blasting them with your missiles. I've tried to sell Glutton to some of the companies that market game software to computer owners, companies like Broderbund and Sirius, but I haven't been successful yet. As far as the future is concerned, I plan to go to college. I'd like to go to a good private university, a technical one like MIT, Caltech, or Stanford. After that, I think I'd like to be a game programmer and maybe work for Atari, iMagic, or Activision, or some company like that. Those quotes were from Computer Kids by George Sullivan. But Tracey didn't go to any of those colleges. He died in 1986 of brain cancer. He had just turned 18. I talked with Tracey's mother, Leola Wooldridge, and his brother, Corey Cullinan, about their memories of Tracey. This interview took place on April 17, 2020. In it, we discussed John Dickerson, whom I previously interviewed.
Looking at some things, I finally got together all these different books that are here, and I have a big picture of the whole group, and our son was just above the man who's now been on television. He's John Dickerson, and so he was right below in the picture of the group there. I have several pages that are on computers that are Atari Youth Advisors. So it really is carried not very far, but it did. There's a man who wrote for him, George Sullivan. Have you heard of him? Because he wrote pictures, and one of them, I don't know who else was on this, but Tracey was one of the people putting the information.
George Sullivan was the author of that Computer Kids book.
That's right.
It says very nice things about Tracey.
Everything about that picture that my mom was talking about is that Todd Bridges from Different Strokes is down there looking super cool. You can totally tell who the famous person is in the picture. It's hilarious.
Right.
There are a bunch of smart, nice geeks, and then there's a few kids, John Dickerson and Todd Bridges, who look like they're ready for prime time on TV. It's funny.
The other famous person was Matthew Labatreau. He was on Little House on the Prairie and Whiz Kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's the kid who looks like a kid straight out of 8 is Enough with that haircut, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about. He's the third person in the picture who looks like ready for a photo shoot. It's hilarious. Yeah, I love that picture.
Are you still down in the Bay Area?
It's beautiful.
We're in Los Altos.
Okay.
My mom still lives in the house that my brother and I grew up in.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah.
All right. So where should we start talking about Tracey? How did he get into computers?
He had started, I think, at the local down on the corner when he was a junior in high school, or not. No, he wasn't even in. He was in the one in between. He
was in middle school. Yep, he was at Egan Middle School.
Yeah, and he was spending so much time at the I don't know what you call it at the
ComputerLand. It was a computer store called ComputerLand at the Village Court.
So,
yep.
Yeah, so you can fill that in easily. But we've got some pictures of both of our boys. Tracey is the one who he started just nibbling at things and was fixing. He was fixing things, and everybody said, "Who's that doing the fixing?" Because he was a very small boy, and he could do anything on computers. They loved him and he loved them back. So we had to go over to the school to get him permission to spend that day being rather late or early, I guess, using making some money on what he was doing and all of that. They had some kind of information you had to give them or something. So, but he enjoyed it thoroughly. It was very close to where we live now. So
yeah, it was walking distance from our house. It was only about a half mile from our house, Kevin. And basically what my mom's saying, and Mom, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think my brother hung out at ComputerLand so much and would sort of explain things to customers, even though he didn't work there, that eventually they just offered him a job, even though he was only a 7th or 8th grader. And so he would just go down, sort of like I would go. My future was in music and soccer, and I would go down just past ComputerLand was Tower Records, which is a record store that is now defunct. And I would go to Tower Records and spend hours going through records and looking through different things, and he would go to ComputerLand, and we both walked to those places. And
Yeah.
I never got offered a job at Tower Records, but he got offered a job at ComputerLand.
Yeah, yeah.
And the other thing I can remember is I can't remember the name of my brother's boss. I can see a picture of him in my head, and I know he's in the Today Show story with Jane Pauley. I know he's interviewed there, his name there. But I think one thing that was
Yeah.
a fun thing about Trey
back.
working there is that he was so young and he's so little that he was sort of a curiosity for customers to come in there. I think it was sort of a funny sales point for the store that they had this, tiny young salesperson.
He went to, it was practically in the middle of the night, early morning. We flew to the East Coast, and I forgot about this one, but he was on the morning show or something.
Yeah, the Today Show. Yeah.
Yeah, do you remember that, Corey?
Yeah, I have a video of it. That Aunt Kathy sent me.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's one of the few, back then we didn't all have cell phones and everything. So I have precious few videos that also have good audio of my brother, and that's one of the few ones I have. So it's a neat thing to have.
Silicon Valley has spawned a number of business success stories, and here is the one about Superior Software.
Told him what I was interested in, and he said, sure, I can do that. So I said, well, can you come over and talk to me about it? And he said, no, I can't. And I said, why? He said, well, I can't drive.
Well, late last year, the president of Superior Software overcame this handicap. Tracey Cullinan turned 16 and he got his driver's license. Now the entire Silicon Valley is fair game for this young entrepreneur who treats business as anything but child's play.
And we were impressed by the fact that here was a 15-year-old who had the initiative to start his own company and was very professional about it at that. He had his own professionally printed stationery and sleeves for the diskettes and really went after his market.
Superior's market is business software, and the company is growing as fast as the president or as fast as school permits.
For Alma products, the inventory gets shifted from category to category.
He isn't just talking bits and bytes like some of the computer kids out there. He also has somewhat of a business sense.
When you hear so much about the youth of the country in some kind of decay, Tracey is the example you want to hold up and say, hey, no, you're all wrong. Look at this. This is a wonderful young man, and I had the great fortune of meeting him and working with him and learning that, hey, the youth of the country ain't so bad.
Tracey Cullinan is here with us this morning in the studio, and welcome. Where'd you get your computer expertise?
Well, I'm pretty much self-taught, and I learned it from books and magazines. I was first interested in electronics, and I subscribed to a lot of electronics magazines. And I started seeing a lot of articles about programming computers. I thought it was really interesting, so...
So what else is new in Silicon Valley for a teenager to be interested in computers? How did you make the leap then from playing with computers to, I could make some money in this business?
Well, I was going into a local computer store, ComputerLand of Los Altos, and I was in there a lot, and I would demonstrate the computers when the salespeople were busy. And so one summer they offered me a job
at
there.
13?
At 13, right.
Yeah. Now, I can understand how you can have this computer expertise, but the kind of work you do, a businessman calls you and wants you to, in effect, put the books in computer software. How do you know about business without an MBA or even an accounting degree?
Well, most of the time the person comes to me with, and they know pretty much what they want out of the program, and they lay out to me what they want to enter into the program and what kind of reports they want out, whether it's invoices on a pre-printed invoice sheet or a report of all the bills that haven't been paid.
You do have to know a little bit about business then, don't
Right.
you? Finance. What's your fee?
Well, for programming, I've been charging $25 an hour.
That's pretty good. By Valley standards, is that high or low?
Well, that's not really high. That's sort of in the medium-low range, because I do my work after school and on weekends only, so it might take a little longer to get completed than a full-time.
What kind of weekly income are we talking about?
Well, that's hard to say. It depends on how much work I do and
how much homework you have?
How much homework I have.
Are you as good at your own homework as you are at the $25 an hour paid business?
I do pretty well.
Pretty well. Would you call yourself the smartest kid in your class, or certainly one of them?
Well, I don't know.
Are you an exceptional kid by most of your friends' standards, or are you just a regular guy?
I've got an A average, but, you know, I'm just a regular guy, I guess.
Yeah, a regular guy's worth $25 an hour. We thank you for being with us, and congratulations. I know time is money, and you've got to run. Tracey Cullinan, thank you.
Thanks.
In a moment, a report on robots. They still need a little work. We need a station break.
How do you think he felt about, you know, being asked to be on TV? Was he okay with it, or was he nervous? Was he excited?
Well, I mean, he really was pretty ready for anything. You know, he didn't make a fuss about it.
But I'll follow up on something my mom was saying. You were asking about if my brother was nervous about this, and one of the things that I really admired about him, I'll probably choke up a little just talking about it, but that I have carried with me is she's right that for whatever reason my brother was pretty unflappable, and he wasn't this big, bold, boisterous Mr. Popularity type, but he just was not a worrier. And I'm quite convinced that this is one of the things that made him very good at programming, because he was a sort of calm problem solver and just addressed the issue. And this really came into play when he got sick and when he got cancer, and it was fairly remarkable how he handled that situation, just to deal with the problem as best he could and then get on with the rest of his life every day, which was an amazing thing for me to witness. But so you can even see it if you're watching the interview. It's funny because he's very calm in the interview, and I remember, and I'm very grateful to the Today Show for doing this interview, and I have a lot of respect for Jane Pauley and all that. And she kept asking him this question about, you know, is he making a lot of money? Is he rich? Is he whatever? Deflected that very calmly, you know, I'm doing all right, but I'm just a normal kid and whatever. But it was funny because she was more interested in sort of the business aspects behind what he was doing, as opposed to, you know, the computer aspects. And that's probably because she had more expertise in that area. But I've watched the interview several times, and he, for however old he is, 15 years old or whatever, he's very good at sort of deflecting her. Who's smarter than all the other kids, and do you make more money than the other kids? And he very sort of calmly deflected those questions as sort of silly. And I think it was only a few months later that he had his first seizure and was soon diagnosed with a brain tumor. So that's another interesting thing about that interview as a time capsule, is it was.
Yeah.
In fact, he was probably already sick when he did that interview.
He was interviewed by a Chinese record, because we went to China, not China. We went to Japan. We went to Japan, and so he learned something about them there too. And then they came back, and they just kept wanting a little bit more and a little bit more. But it was of course in a foreign language. So we didn't hear.
And when we went to Japan, he had been diagnosed. He was already sick.
So what was this thing in Japan?
Yeah, World Expo in
Tsukuba, Japan. It had the world's biggest TV.
Yeah.
It was this major crazy thing.
So how did he get
technology expo or something?
Huh, neat. So how did Tracey get involved with the Youth Advisory Board?
Well, gee, that's a
I have no idea.
I don't know. Maybe because of the corners of the
ComputerLand.
Atari
wasn't Atari located in Silicon Valley, right near where we lived. So
Yeah.
they may have.
Yeah.
That's true, isn't it, Kevin? Yeah.
Yes.
So they may have found out about him from ComputerLand, and he had some clients in the area. I remember this is on the video too. That's probably why I remember it more than anything from my own experience. Word had probably gotten around that there was some, 13, 14, 15-year-old kid who was, doing professional computer work.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I understand that as part of that, he went to Chicago to work at the Atari booth at the Consumer Electronics Show.
Is that true?
Yeah,
Mom?
he and his dad went to the various of those things. I don't know about Chicago being one of them, but there were different ones that he'd gone to. He probably knew more than a lot of the young kids they put in a corner or something. Mm-hmm. But I don't remember Chicago for instance.
Mom, you tell me if this is right, if you remember. I seem to remember that, because I think I have this right, that the guy who owned Atari also owned Chuck E. Cheese.
Yes.
And so the Atari Youth Advisory Board would have like parties for the kids at Chuck E. Cheese. That would be like the end of when they would get together and meet.
They certainly made good of
I was jealous
food,
about that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you got to feed people to get them to do something. Of course.
Right. So that place all sorts of video games and stuff. So it was a perfect, venue for the kids in the Atari Youth Advisory Board. Half of the machines, actually all of the machines there were probably Atari. I don't know.
Corey, tell me about, you have some memories of both Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak came to visit Tracey?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I have very vivid memories of Steve Jobs visiting. And I have actually two memories of different events with Steve Jobs. What's funny about Steve Wozniak, I'll come back to Steve Jobs in a moment, but I actually either don't remember or had no idea Wozniak even visited until I posted something, I can't remember what it was, and John Reed, one of the other dads, who's my mom's generation, she posted and said, Wozniak came to your house too. And I said, really? I didn't know that. I think I was like off at soccer practice that day or something. I have no recollection of Wozniak coming. But what I do remember is, and it's funny because I play at Wozniak. Wozniak is the main funder for the San Jose Children's Museum, and I'm a kids musician, and I tour and play there every year. So I am still somewhat involved with things that Wozniak does. But what I remember about Steve Jobs is two stories. One is I remember the first time he came to our house. I think it was the first time. I don't think it was the first time.
He was in a wheelchair.
Well, yeah, my brother was not only in a wheelchair. When he was at home, he was in a sort of stay-at-home bed or whatever you call it in the family room. And I think this may have been the first time my brother met Steve Jobs, but it was the first time I met him. And he came over and I was a music kid and a soccer kid. So what I knew about Steve Jobs is he was the Joe Montana of the computer world. I knew he was this cool guy. And at the time he was at Next, he had left Apple through, not exactly voluntary reasons, right? And he came and he was, my brother's idol. And he came and sat with my brother for a long time. And we sort of let them sit in the room by themselves for a long time, and then I came in for a while. And what I do remember, and I found this fascinating after I read the biography of him by, I think the guy's name is Walter Isaacson or something. He came into the kitchen where my mother and I were. And Steve Jobs, I remember this. I remember he implored my mother for minutes to give my brother 3,000 calories of carrot juice every day, because he was very interested in alternative medicine solutions to, cure cancer and things like this. And I remember after he left, I remember turning to my mom, and I was very grateful to Steve Jobs. So I only said this because I thought it was funny, but I remember turning to my mom and saying, "That's the smartest man in the world."
And we sat in the front. We stood in the front, at the front, on the front place and just talked about what we had just seen, because some other people were getting him back into the cart that was going to take him, and that was but anyway, I'm not sure that those went right together, but anyway, it was really from people we knew here. Right, we knew a number of people here who were interested in, and very like John Reed, who was mentioned here, is still he's now he's selling at stores now. But
John works at Apple. Yeah, he's selling.
Yeah, John Reed.
He still does.
In other words, we knew people, and that's why we didn't know all these people, but we knew people who did, and who talked about that you ought to get so and so here and so there.
Yeah, it was really nice of them. And I'll tell you the other story that I remember about Steve Jobs, and the thing I really wanted to say, because despite my dumb teenage joke to my mother about that's the smartest man in the world, I know it was what he did was very sincere and thoughtful. And two things stand out on that for me. One is, from reading his biography, I know he did the same thing for himself. He tried alternative medicine for about 9 months before he went on, conventional medicine when he himself got cancer.
Right.
And this stood out to me about Steve Jobs, and honestly, this is why I have bought virtually every Apple product that has ever existed, aside from the fact that I think they're wonderful products, is, you hear all these stories about Steve Jobs being, a cutthroat businessman, tough to work for, whatever. And I'm sure those are probably true, and that's probably one of the reasons he was so successful. But I will tell you that this man, who was extremely famous, came to visit my brother multiple times. And there were no cameras. It was not for PR or anything like that. And I remember when he took me and my brother a tour of Next Computers, and my brother was in a wheelchair at the time, and I was frankly just there because I was a little brother. I was tagging along. I had no idea what the hell they were talking about, except I knew that it was very smart and beyond my pay grade. But he took us around. I don't know how. My memory is it was an hour or two, and I don't know how long it was. But what I do know is he took us from place to place. This is before the Next Computers came out, from room to room at Next, and was talking in detail with my brother about, here's what we're doing with the computers, and my brother was talking about, and they were having conversations about what should be done with them and all this stuff. And he devoted so much time, and he treated, I'm emotional just talking about it. He treated my brother with so much respect, and it was like me getting to see, meet Beethoven. Right. And then I remember we left, and he was very gracious to me as well. And I didn't know anything. I was clearly just, a dumb 15. Whenever I hear stories about Steve Jobs being tough, I think also about how generous of spirit he was to our family.
It sounds like Tracey managed to somehow, he was this young computer kid, and he got to be like semi-famous for, he knew all these important people, and he was written about in a book, and that must have just been very, very strange, very wild.
Mm-hmm.
I hardly noticed it, to be honest. It was really cool. Mm-hmm. He was a very low-key kid.
Yeah.
He hung out. All of his friends were the most geeky, brilliant, brainiac people you could possibly imagine. I mean, that was his friends group who would come over, and but he was a very sort of down-to-earth kid. He would still go play punt back with me in the front yard with the football, and we were very close. It was interesting. We had completely different areas where we were sort of passionate about and excelled. So there was almost zero competition between us, unlike I think a lot of siblings, just because he sort of had his thing and I had my thing. We both did fine in school, but so yeah, I did not really perceive him as a superstar, partly because of the way he behaved, and I only sort of realized after he passed away that it was sort of preposterous how many cool things and how much exposure he'd already gotten by the time he was 15 or 16 years old. It wasn't really a topic of much conversation in our house, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Lee, are there any other stories about this time, about Tracey, about computer things that you would like to share that I haven't asked you yet?
I think I should look through again. I'm looking by another writer, Tracey, who says he is self-taught primarily, knows 6 computer languages. He uses a computer for writing reports. For fun, he makes up computer games. One is Glutton. The problem took 6 months to write on his Apple and runs to 50 pages. So I didn't know anything about this, but Corey, have you heard about
I'll tell
that?
you one cool thing I remember about Glutton, and this was an area where our interests intersected because I do professional music production now, but back then I was already interested in where I used computers is I was using the early music sequencers and the early composition programs and things like that. And back in those very, very early days, there was almost no polyphony. You could hardly do, more than one note at a time. And as I understood it, and I could be wrong here, but as I understood it, the Apple IIe that he was programming for was limited to playing one sound at a time. And I don't know if he figured this out at the same time as other people figuring it out, or if he did it on his own or what. But I remember he wanted to have polyphonic music as a soundtrack to his game. And the way he solved this problem was to have, three note chords and pitches playing, and every note was so short that it would do, the first, the third, and the fifth of the chord all in sequence extremely fast, and then repeat that sequence. And so the music almost sounded like you were singing like this, and that's how he would
Very
create.
nice.
That's how he would. Thank you very much. You can see I'm a professional. And that's how he created polyphonic music. And I always thought that was quite ingenious. And I remember him talking to me about that at length. It was, to be honest, it was one of the few things he talked about with me and discussed with me at length about his programming, because it was actually an interest level and, for a 7th grader area of expertise of mine, if that makes any sense. So I remember that. And, I've always been bummed that I can't play Glutton anymore because it was for the Apple IIe, and, this is sort of a news flash, but I don't think anybody really uses the Apple IIe anymore.
Oh, you are wrong, sir. If you have those discs, there is a good chance that we can get that game and make it playable on a modern computer.
Oh, you don't know how much that would mean to me, and I'll tell you why. Because my daughters are 17 and 15, which are the exact age that my brother was and I was when my brother passed away, I believe. And they've heard about my brother and they've seen the Today Show video and stuff. And it would be really cool to be able to show them that game and, say, this is what he did. And he was, in between your 2 ages when he did this. So that would mean a lot to me if there's some way that we could figure out how to get that game. I do remember the other thing that I thought was awesome about the Atari Youth Advisory Board is part of the swag that my brother got for being in it is we got an Atari computer, not an Atari game console, but an Atari computer. I can't remember what the Atari computer was called.
It was a 1200 XL.
But what I do, yeah, maybe that's what, okay. I mean, I'll take your word for it. I don't remember. But I remember it was in our family room, and what I loved about the Atari computer is that I got obsessed with this game called Joust, and I played Joust a lot. Do you remember that game?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So that to me was a big win. I was very grateful to my brother for being in the Atari Youth Advisory Board, so that we got that computer that I could play Joust on.
Yes. I'm just remembering too that he got after he had the job at the corner for this place that had ComputerLand, right? And then he had a man he found, which Corey, you'll probably remember this, that he was an independent person who was, doing, I don't know what all he was doing, but he got in touch with Corey needing something to do on the, not Corey.
Got in touch with Tracey, yep.
That's you. That's you.
If he had gotten in touch with me, he would have gotten nowhere.
Yeah.
Except, maybe a good pickup soccer game. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! It's lucky there weren't any other children. I'd really be out of it. Anyway, he was making some money on that, and he set up some. He and his dad made these cards and also ways to introduce it. And there was one man in particular who had him working for him for some time. He was wanting to. Again, he couldn't do the activities of it, but he wanted them to do something, and so that was another, but just a local person, which was much easier to do than to fly to the West Coast and so on.
Sure.
But anyway,
I think he wrote a program. I think he wrote a program for some local accountant or something like that to do something in his office.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure this is in that Today story. Maybe that's where I remember it from.
Anyway, he was starting into making some money, which he was happy to do.
Mom, I know to answer your question about him making some money, I know from watching the Jane Pauley interview that he made $25 an hour because she grilled him on that. She really wanted to know how much he made. And that was a fair amount for a 13-year-old kid to make in, 1983 or whatever that was.
I got the impression he said a lower number than actual. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. It's just my
really,
impression.
I have no idea. Yeah.
Yeah,
Great. That's funny.
So if you could send a message to the people who are still are listening to this and are still using Atari computers, what would you tell them, Corey?
I guess what I would say is your resources are not as significant as your creativity and drive. And this is what I tell my students. I teach college now, and this is what I tell my kids. My brother, certainly we were more fortunate than many growing up in Los Altos, but essentially he was a kid with a couple computers that, can do 1/1,000,000th of what your MacBook Air can do now. And kids like my brother were doing all sorts of cool things and coming up with ingenious solutions to problems like monophony and sound and things like that. And as I watched my brother and his friends who he programmed with and things, I learned a lot about resilience and creativity and problem solving. And just staying the course until you achieve the result that you want to achieve with the materials you have. And I think that's a fantastic lesson for anybody to take.
Mm-hmm.
Great answer.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
My mom likes that lesson. I'm glad you like that, Mom. I always want my mom to be proud of me.
Was my next question. Lee, you must be proud of both of them.
Yes, that's right. In fact, I had a
proud
crazy.
of you, Mom.
Thank you. That's good. That's good to know. So anyway, we've the stone. Oh yes, in front of the Los Altos High School is a big rock that has Tracey's name on there and everything. Yeah, a plaque is on there. So that was very nice.
Oh, how nice.
Mm-hmm. When he did die, the kids at the school just all came around and they were just flabbergasted and although it was coming for a long time. The kids came to visit him every day. I don't know if they planned it, but they made these bracelets, and it wasn't even just the girls. but they made bracelets for her and took things into him so that he would, because by that time he was in bed, and so they were just all so sweet to him, and just
they were. And what I remember, I guess two things, both back then and in the now today. My brother, the backstory perhaps is not that important, nor do I quite remember it, but my brother was known for saying, "Have a nice day" to people.
Oh, yes, that's right.
And drawing smiley faces. And he was
that's
sort of
right.
partly sincere and partly being sarcastic because he thought it was such a cheesy phrase all at once.
Okay.
And after he passed away, I'm going to tear up a little just talking about this, but after he passed away, I arrived back at school a few days later, and the students had all painted the quad, this hangout space, with this giant yellow smiley face, like giant, 30 feet wide, as a tribute to him, and that was a very powerful thing. And I still, it's interesting. People still remember him. I have a friend of mine now, a guy named Rick Gould, who we both went to Stanford after Los Altos High, but we were different ages. He was my brother's age, and he's married to somebody in my class from high school. And I saw him a couple months ago, and he was telling me stories about my brother, and that he loved my brother, and he admired, his calm and his smarts and stuff. And I didn't even know that Rick really knew my brother, which I probably should have assumed he did. They kind of ran in similar circles. But I still get emails and Facebook posts from people every once in a while saying, I want to be your Facebook friend. I knew your brother, and I want to tell you a few things about him. So he was somebody that people liked. And he earned that. I felt that he earned that.
That's nice.
I am sorry that I didn't get to know him as well. He sounds like a wonderful person. Thank you both for your time. I appreciate you sharing your memories, and it was very kind of you both.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to help us remember him. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye, Mom. I love you.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute, make a tax-deductible contribution to the Internet Archive, a nonprofit digital library that has done incredible things to preserve computer history. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate. Thanks.